Do you believe what you see? Do you trust what you hear? Do you think what you touch, taste, or smell defines what's real? Most people live as if the five senses were a clear window into the truth, as if sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch showed reality exactly as it is. But what if I told you these senses are invisible prisons, narrow filters that limit your perception, fragments of a much larger whole that remains hidden? Modern science already admits it. What our eyes capture is a tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. What our ears detect is only a narrow band of sound frequencies. And what we call reality is, in truth, the brain's interpretation of limited stimuli. In other words, we don't see what is. We see only what we're able to see. And because we trust the five senses too much, humanity fell for the materialist illusion. The idea that the world is only what can be measured, touched, weighed, or counted. That's the biggest lie keeping us stuck on the surface of existence. Reality isn't solid matter. Reality is energy, frequency, vibration, consciousness. Everything in the universe is energy. Nikola Tesla put it plainly. If you want to understand reality, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. What we call the solid world is in fact empty. An atom is 99.9999% space. The nucleus and electrons are a vanishingly small portion. The feel of solidity is just how our senses translate energetic fields into tactile perceptions. This means what we call touch isn't actual physical contact. It's an interaction of electromagnetic forces. Smell, taste, sight, and hearing work the same way. Limited translations of vibrations. The brain receives electrical signals, decodes them, and builds an inner experience we call reality. But that's not reality itself. It's only the brain's rendering. Think about it. Your eye doesn't see light. It detects frequencies between approximately 400 and 700 nanometers. Your ear doesn't hear sound. It detects air oscillations between roughly 20 and 20,000 hertz. Taste recognizes a handful of basic flavors: sweet, salty, bitter, sour, umami. The rest is mental composition. Here's the core issue. If we perceive only a fraction of reality, how can we assume reality is limited to that fraction? The invisible is far vaster than the visible. Subtle frequencies, spiritual fields, non-physical dimensions surround us, but remain inaccessible as long as we rely only on the five senses. And there's a deeper revelation. The invisible field isn't just unregistered physical frequencies. There is something beyond quantum physics, beyond electromagnetic waves. There is the field of pure consciousness. This field doesn't vibrate like physical energy. It simply is, the backdrop on which all vibrations dance, the blank screen on which the film of reality is projected. Eastern traditions call it the luminous void, Brahman, Tao. Christian mystics speak of the God beyond God. Some physicists suspect a unified field of pure information, prior to matter and energy. Here's the secret your five senses will never reveal. You're not merely surrounded by energetic fields. You are the field itself, temporarily forgetting itself while playing at being a person limited by the senses. Many believe the brain is like a camera that faithfully records reality. The truth is the opposite. The brain doesn't show everything. The brain filters almost everything. Every second, millions of bits of information hit our senses. Only a tiny fraction is processed consciously. The rest is discarded. Why? Biologically, we don't need the whole of reality to survive, only fragments of it. Imagine sitting in a giant cinema with a 1,000-meter screen, but you only have a tiny peephole. You see a sliver of the scene and assume that's the entire film. That's human perception. Our brains evolved to select survival-relevant stimuli: food, predators, mates, immediate dangers. The invisible, the subtle, the spiritual, these got filtered out because they didn't guarantee the body's short-term survival. The problem is that when we believe life is only what we see, we collapse into brutal reductionism. We lose the capacity to access higher planes of reality. We become blind to the essential. Here's the revolutionary discovery. The brain doesn't only filter input from outside, it also blocks input from inside. Research shows that in deep meditation, under certain psychedelics, or in near-death experiences, the brain shows less activity, not more. As the brain's usual filters dim, access opens to deeper layers of consciousness. This hints at something extraordinary. Consciousness isn't produced by the brain. Consciousness exists independently, and the brain functions as a limiter, a reducer that narrows conscious experience to fit physical survival. That's why, when the brain's filter relaxes, through dreaming, meditation, altered states, you access information that didn't arrive via the five senses: premonitions, intuitions, visions, telepathic exchanges, out-of-body experiences. The brain isn't the creator of consciousness. It's the jailer. Let's examine sight more deeply. Do you think you see the world as it is? You don't. You see only a narrow band of visible light. Infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, microwaves, radio waves, all present right now, are invisible to your eyes. It's like living in an ocean of unseen frequencies, while only perceiving a thin line across it. And vision is constructed. The brain fills gaps, invents color, creates contrast. You don't see the world. You see a version fabricated by your nervous system. Optical illusions prove it. Simple drawings can trick the brain into perceiving motion where there is none, color where none exists, shapes that aren't there. Sight isn't faithful, it's interpretive. Trusting sight blindly is a setup for error. The invisible dwarfs the visible. Deeper still, your eyes don't see anything at all. The eye merely detects photons, colorless, formless, meaningless packets of light. What you call vision is created by the brain. Color doesn't exist out there. The red of a rose isn't in the rose. When a certain frequency of light reaches your brain, it generates the inner experience called red. That means you've never actually seen a rose. You've seen a neural interpretation of photons reflected by a molecular structure you call a rose. Here's the spiritual leap. If the physical world you see is already a mental creation, how many other worlds can mind create when it's not limited by eyes? Seers, prophets, shamans have long reported visions of other worlds and beings of light. Materialist science says, that's just imagination. But if the so-called real world you see is also mental rendering, what's the fundamental difference between seeing with eyes and seeing with imagination? Both are creative acts of consciousness. The difference is, one is collective. We share a physical rendering. The other is individual. Inner visions vary. But what if there are collective levels of subtle sight? What if, as consciousness expands, you can access dimensions other trained seers also perceive? What if imagination is actually a perceptual organ for non-physical realities? This is the spiritual revolution. Understanding that seeing isn't capturing what's out there, but generating an inner experience. And if you can generate the experience of a physical world, you can generate the experience of spiritual worlds. Similarly, human hearing covers roughly 20 to 20,000 hertz, a sliver. Dogs hear up to approximately 60,000 hertz. Bats perceive ultrasounds. Whales sense infrasound across oceans. In other words, a cosmic symphony is always playing, but we only hear a distant echo. Even that echo is interpreted. The brain organizes waves, imposes patterns, and decides what counts as melody or noise. Translation, not direct experience. Here's the spiritual angle. If the universe vibrates on infinite scales, might angels, guides, or beings from other dimensions be communicating at frequencies we simply don't detect? Maybe silence isn't emptiness. Maybe it's just what lies beyond our narrow auditory range. Every tradition speaks of sacred sound. The Hindu Om, the Christian Amen, the Islamic Allah. Not just words, vibrations meant to connect us with higher dimensions. The secret is this: these sacred sounds don't work because of the frequencies reaching your ears. They work because of the frequencies they awaken within you. When you chant a mantra, you're not merely making noise. You're activating subtle energy centers, harmonizing your inner vibration, tuning into fields of consciousness beyond physical hearing. You may have noticed that in deep silence, meditation, nature, profound peace, you sometimes hear something that isn't a physical sound. a subtle hum, a sense of presence, as if silence itself had an acoustic quality. Mystics call it the soundless sound, the cosmic hum, the music of the spheres. It doesn't arrive through the ear, it's perceived by consciousness. This suggests an inner ear, not a physical organ, but consciousness's capacity to perceive subtle vibrations that permeate existence. As you develop this inner ear, you begin to receive guidance, insights, messages with no identifiable external source, arising out of silence itself. Perhaps that's exactly what it is. Cosmic consciousness whispering through frequencies your physical ears will never catch. Moving beyond hearing, human taste distinguishes only a few basics. Smell recognizes chemical molecules within narrow ranges, yet both can ignite memories, emotions, and interior states. But how many flavors of life exist beyond the tongue? How many spiritual aromas lie beyond the nose? Ancient traditions speak of the fragrance of the sacred, the sweetness of the soul, the nectar of immortality, metaphors pointing to subtle realities perceived inwardly, not by physical senses. Taste and smell remind us that our perception is boxed into biology, while countless existential flavors lie beyond the body. Notice how certain scents instantly transport you to another time, place, or feeling. Flowers evoking childhood, incense inviting meditation. Smell plugs directly into the limbic system, the brain's emotional memory hub, bypassing the rational cortex, a direct route to deeper layers of psyche. Spiritually, if physical molecules can trigger memories and altered states, could there be subtle molecules, non-physical essences, capable of triggering spiritual perception? Many report heavenly fragrances in mystical moments, roses without roses, indescribable perfumes during prayer, sense of sanctity emanating from spiritually evolved people. Materialism says, imagination. But what if it's more? What if subtle dimensions communicate via aromatic codes, information received not by the nose, but by a spiritual smell, detecting non-material essences? Likewise for taste. Scriptures speak of the taste of the divine, the sweetness of enlightenment, the flavor of truth, not just poetry. In genuine insight, union, or ecstatic states, there's often a literal inner taste, a delicate gustatory quality accompanying higher states. It's as if consciousness had its own taste buds, able to savor different frequencies of reality. Touch might be the most deceptive sense. When you touch a table, you believe your skin meets solid matter, but no atom in your body ever touches the table's atoms. What you feel is electromagnetic repulsion between atomic fields, meaning you've never actually touched anything. You've felt interactions of invisible fields. This should rewrite our sense of the real. Solidity is a sensory illusion. Matter is energy condensed into vibration. So the physical world isn't physical. It's vibration interpreted as solidity. Deeper still, if physical touch is already a creation of consciousness, why couldn't there be spiritual touch, sensations not dependent on skin contact, but on subtle energetic connection? How many times have you sensed someone's presence before seeing them? Felt eyes on your back? Walked into a room heavy with bad energy, or light with good energy? These are forms of subtle touch. The consciousness's capacity to feel energetic fields that don't arrive through the skin. In deep meditation, many report expansion, dissolution, merging with surroundings, being touched by invisible presence, wrapped in unconditional love, embraced by cosmic energies. Materialism says projection. But if physical touch is already a projection of consciousness interpreting energy fields, what's the fundamental difference? Both are tactile experiences created by consciousness. The difference is that one is mediated by skin, the other is consciousness to consciousness. What if spiritual touch is more real, directly connecting consciousness with consciousness? No material intermediaries. Here's the revolution. Everything physical is already spiritual. Consciousness playing with itself through the mask of material limits. And this brings us to the crux. Everything is frequency. Color is frequency. Sound is frequency. Smell is frequency. Touch is frequency. Reality is a set of frequencies translated into human perceptions. Beyond those bands are infinite others we cannot perceive. That's where spirituality enters. Subtle planes and spiritual dimensions are made of frequencies beyond the five senses. To access them, we need a different mode of perception: intuition, expanded awareness, inner vision. Traditions call this the third eye, the inner ear, the sensing of the soul, subtle organs of perception not dependent on the body, but on expanded consciousness. If everything is frequency, then you are frequency. Thoughts, emotions, desires, fears, all vibrate within energetic bands. Here lies the secret of spiritual transformation. Change your inner frequency, and you change what you can perceive. Raise your vibration, and you tune into higher dimensions. Like a radio, you only catch stations matching your dial. Tune to classical, get classical. Tune to rock, get rock. Consciousness works the same. If you vibrate in fear, anger, anxiety, you perceive reality through those bands. Danger everywhere, threat, hostility. Raise your frequency through meditation, love, gratitude, compassion, and you begin sensing higher layers of existence. You notice beauty where you saw ugliness, feel love where you felt fear, find meaning where you saw chance. At the highest frequencies, mystics speak of grace, union, unconditional love, oneness, not fantasy. Tuning into spiritual bands of reality that were always there, waiting for you to rise to meet them. If the senses are narrow windows, we must ask, what lies beyond them? If sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste don't cover the whole, what remains when we stop pretending reality is only what we can measure or touch? Modern physics leaves clues. Everything is frequency. Every particle, object, and thought vibrates within energy bands. The universe isn't solid, it's vibrational. Matter is energy condensed into specific resonance patterns. Our five senses translate only a small fraction of this ocean. Sight sees less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. Hearing catches a tiny portion of possible sound waves. Touch detects only certain vibrational densities. Smell and taste track limited molecules, blind to the vast information swimming in the air. We live inside a narrow crop, like a room with tiny slits, believing those slits are the whole universe. But the invisible persists, frequencies we can't catch, worlds coexisting with us. Spirituality has always said this: planes, dimensions, subtle realms. Science is just beginning to corroborate what the ancients intuited. Deeper still, beyond unperceived physical frequencies are frequencies of pure consciousness transcending the physical universe entirely. Picture existence as an immense orchestra. Physical frequencies, light, sound, heat, magnetism, are just the front row. There are other rows, other instruments, other melodies playing simultaneously. Emotional frequencies: love, fear, joy, sorrow. Each a band you can pick up if you're sensitive. Mental frequencies: thoughts, ideas, insights, sometimes perceived telepathically or as downloads. Spiritual frequencies: grace, mystical states, sacred communion, accessible when consciousness expands beyond the personal. At the center of all this is the frequency of pure consciousness, not a particular vibration, but the open space in which all vibrations occur. The discovery: you're not only a receiver, you're a transmitter. Your consciousness constantly emits energetic signals that influence reality around you. The human brain wasn't designed to reveal all of reality. It's a survival filter. If you perceived everything, every wave, frequency, particle, energy, you'd be overwhelmed. So the brain cuts. It discards nearly all and hands you just enough to function in the physical world. First revelation: we don't see what is, we see what we need to survive. Spiritually, that means human experience is edited from birth. We live in a perceptual simulation. The mind builds a stage for you, a set with colors and sounds, while the real stays behind the curtain. Here's the key. To understand spirituality, we have to get past the filter. We can't rely solely on the five senses. We must cultivate inner senses, expand awareness beyond what the brain spoon feeds us. Game changer. Studies of psychedelics, deep meditation, and near death show something stunning. When brain activity decreases, consciousness expands. If the brain produced consciousness, less brain should mean less consciousness. Yet the opposite appears. Less throttling, more experience. Think of the brain as a dam and consciousness as a river. Open the gates, lower brain control, more water flows. Close them tighter, higher control, less flows. This suggests consciousness isn't produced by the brain. It exists on its own. The brain modulates it, regulating the intensity to fit bodily life. When you meditate deeply, fast, breathe intentionally, contemplate, you're lowering the filter's activity. Blocked layers become accessible. That's why mystics quiet the mind, not to annihilate thought, but to relax the filter so more reality can pass through. Mental silence isn't emptiness, it's fullness, consciousness meeting itself without intermediaries. The masters always said, "What is essential is invisible to the eye." Not poetic metaphor, another kind of science. They knew eyes don't grasp totality. Heart, intuition, and expanded awareness are more precise gateways to truth. When a monk meditates, a shaman journeys, or a mystic contemplates, they're escaping the prison of the senses, silencing the brain's filter to experience the real without go-betweens. The spiritual isn't proven by seeing, touching, or hearing. It's lived, not with eyes but with presence, not with ears but with attunement. Why do traditions across time and culture converge on the same claims? Because when you move beyond the senses, you access universal layers of existence. These aren't mere cultural fantasies, they're discoveries. Mystics are explorers crossing perceptual borders. They map territories of consciousness beyond sensory limits. Their reports align. There's a fundamental unity connecting all things. The observed split is illusory. Love is an organizing force, not just an emotion. Consciousness is more fundamental than matter. Death is transition, not ending. Existence carries purpose and meaning. These aren't beliefs. They're data gathered by consciousness explorers over millennia. A spiritual science based on direct experience. As modern science advances, quantum physics, consciousness studies, transpersonal psychology, it increasingly rhymes with ancient findings. Two routes to one truth: the outer, scientific inquiry of the physical, and the inner, direct exploration of awareness. Both point to a reality far more mysterious, interconnected, and conscious than the five senses suggest. If the five physical senses are limited, what inner senses connect us with wider reality? Traditions speak of subtle organs, the third eye, inner ear, spiritual heart. They're not physical organs, but capacities of consciousness that emerge when we stop relying exclusively on material senses. The third eye represents inner vision, not just the pineal gland, though it may correlate anatomically. It's the capacity to see without eyes, perceive energy patterns, visualize information not arriving via the retina, access non-physical dimensions. Sudden insight, seeing solutions, glimpsing the future, perceiving true nature. Third eye work. It communicates in symbols and archetypes. A rose can mean love, a serpent, transformation, a mountain, challenge. Developing it means learning consciousness's symbolic language. The inner ear represents subtle hearing, the ability to hear guidance, insights, messages that don't pass through eardrums, intuition's voice, wisdom arising from silence. Sometimes it's literal, sometimes it's a wordless knowing. It grows in quiet. The less mental noise, the clearer the subtle communications. Meditation trains the ear, not to stop thought, but to hear beyond it. The spiritual heart, not the blood pump, the energetic center that perceives connection, love, compassion, unity. When you feel someone's lie, sense a room's energy, or bond deeply, this is active. It perceives qualities, not quantities. Love, beauty, truth, goodness, real aspects of experience that instruments can't measure. Intuition serves as the unified sense, a direct knowing that bypasses analysis, arriving whole, instant, precise. It operates by resonance. You know because your consciousness vibrates with the truth of a situation. Cultivating intuition means trusting what you perceive more than what you merely compute. The illusion of the senses isn't only personal, it's collective. We live in a consensual prison, an unspoken agreement that reality is only what we can jointly verify through physical senses. From childhood, you're trained to distrust anything that can't be seen, touched, heard, smelled, or tasted by others. See what others don't? Imagination. Hear what others can't? Hallucination. Feel what others don't? Fantasy. This social conditioning tightens the cage. You learn to suppress subtle perception to fit the consensus. Society defines normal as perceiving only what everyone perceives. Anything beyond the five senses is deemed abnormal, pathological, dangerous. But what if normal is the anomaly? What if limiting perception to the five senses is collective blindness? And those with expanded perception simply see more. Visionaries, prophets, and creative geniuses broke the consensus. They saw possibilities, heard inspiration, felt connections others missed, often ridiculed or punished, because expanded perception threatens the status quo. Why cling to the senses? Fear. Physical senses give the illusion of control and predictability. If it can be measured, it feels manageable. The invisible can't be controlled, so humanity collectively chose to ignore it, preferring a small controllable reality to a vast mysterious one. But the price is living at the surface, cut off from depth, mystery, and the sacred. Spiritual awakening means refusing the narrow deal. Trust your subtle perception, even if others won't validate it. It doesn't mean denying the senses. It means including beyond them, living across multiple perceptual layers at once. It's a spiritual rebellion, refusing to live only on the consensus surface. Modern science is inching toward what mystics knew. Consciousness isn't a brain byproduct. It's a fundamental property of reality. Psychedelic research shows that when certain brain hubs quiet, conscious experience can become vast, often including contact with non-physical dimensions, intelligences, and unity. Near-death studies suggest that even with minimal brain activity, people report lucid, detailed experiences. Quantum experiments hint that observation and consciousness can influence physical outcomes in ways classical materialism can't explain. The materialist model, consciousness as brain epiphenomenon, is giving way to frameworks placing consciousness at the base. If consciousness is fundamental, it isn't confined to the five senses. Senses are interfaces consciousness uses for a specific layer of reality. But consciousness can cultivate other interfaces, the inner senses, for other layers. Revolutionary implications follow. Death ends an interface, not consciousness. Other forms of conscious life may exist in dimensions our senses miss. Prayer, meditation, and spiritual practice are technologies for expanding interfaces. Paranormal phenomena may be normal at wider scales. The universe may be fundamentally conscious, with us as local expressions of it. How do we shift from five-sense limitation to perception through inner senses? Ancient practices were built for this. Meditation as active silence, not absence, but pure presence. Quieting the mind removes the noise that masks subtle perception. Insight emerges unforced. Peace appears without external cause. Love flows without an object. Not inventions, discoveries of consciousness about itself. Contemplation serves as the deep gaze, looking beyond surface form. A flower is not just color and shape. It is life, beauty, impermanence, and connection. Contemplation trains you to perceive meaning, pattern, and interrelatedness. Prayer functions as subtle communication, not begging from a distant deity, attuning to higher dimensions of consciousness. Genuine prayer opens channels, resonates with spiritual frequencies, and invites guidance. Fasting enables sensory purification, not only abstaining from food, disidentifying from bodily demands. As the senses quiet, inner senses sharpen. Physical hunger awakens spiritual hunger. Silent retreat becomes the inner laboratory, away from sensory overload. Silence becomes a laboratory to explore realities beyond the senses. Conscious breathing serves as the bridge. Breath links body and subtle awareness. Specific methods shift states, expand perception, and can catalyze transcendence. What world appears when you move past the five senses? A world of infinite connections, held together by invisible threads of meaning, where love is not just emotion, but a binding force of coherence, where beauty is not merely pleasing form, but the underlying harmony of existence, where truth doesn't need proof, only recognition by the resonance it awakens in consciousness. A universal language emerges. Symbols, archetypes, synchronicities. Events once dismissed as random become messages. Dreams guide. Intuition becomes direct knowledge. The greatest revelation is oneness. The split between me and not me, observer and observed, dissolves, seen for what it is, a construct born of sensory limits. Beyond the senses, you realize you aren't separate from the world. You are the world, experiencing itself through a temporary focal point called me. Transcending the five senses doesn't mean rejecting them. It means integrating them into a wider perception. You can enjoy a flower with your eyes, physical sense, while simultaneously perceiving its symbolic meaning, third eye, feeling its connection to all nature, spiritual heart, and receiving insights about impermanence and renewal, intuition, and evolved human lives across the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, denying none, confined by none. Like a musician who plays symphonies, not single notes, each dimension is an instrument in consciousness's orchestra. True wisdom is an escape. It's clear seeing, not denying matter, but recognizing it as conscious energy, not rejecting the body, but honoring it as a temple of awareness. This is an invitation to freedom. Freedom from the prison of the five senses. Freedom from a limiting consensus of what's real. Freedom to explore the infinite dimensions of consciousness. You don't have to believe any of this. You only have to experience it. Meditate deeply. Contemplate sincerely. Pray genuinely. Fast consciously. Then observe. What realities reveal themselves when you stop relying exclusively on what you can see, hear, touch, smell, and taste? Reality is an endless mystery. The five senses show you only the first page of a book with infinite chapters. Each expansion reveals new mysteries. Each crossing opens new frontiers. There is no end to exploration, no ceiling on discovery. Your journey beyond the senses is yours alone. No one can make it for you. No one can hand you your direct experiences. But you're not alone. Thousands have walked before, leaving maps, practices, and markers. On the other side of this crossing waits the most extraordinary discovery of all. You are not merely an observer of infinite reality. You are infinite reality itself, playing at being limited, for the joy of rediscovering your own vastness. The five senses are only the beginning. What lies beyond them is your true nature, unlimited, eternal, pure consciousness recognizing itself in all forms and transcending all forms. This is the illusion of the five senses, making you forget who you are. This is spiritual freedom, remembering your infinite nature, even as you play the finite game of human life. The invitation is made, the door is open. Will you step through?